Hey, how's it going, everybody? Charlie Wilson here, aka Sinister Charlie. Welcome back. We got a long one. I was debating whether I would do this or not because it was so long. The Greatest Rescue, 11th Airborne Division's epic raid on Los Baños. Doesn't that mean the toilets? Yeah, I don't. Yeah, like I said, I was debating whether to do this or not, and good for me. I quit my job, so yeah, I'm going to just be doing this stuff mostly. Hopefully, I can do more live streams. That would be great. So yeah, I got time now. Let's buckle in. I don't know what this is about. I never heard of it, so yeah. Let's get into it.
The biggest airborne mission of all time is Operation Market Garden, when over 41,000 Allied paratroopers jumped into the Netherlands. The most famous airborne operation of all time is probably the jump into Normandy for D-Day. But the most perfect and textbook example of what an airborne operation could and should be is one that you've probably never even heard of.
I haven't. Quack.
Today we're talking about the only airborne division assigned to the Pacific Theater of World War II, the 11th Airborne, and their incredible raid on the Los Baños prison camp. And we're going to get to it right after a word from our sponsor.
This video is brought to you by Delete Me.
It's Finally, okay, I need
Electrician
you to go a mile away and put an apple on your head so I have an alibi for this.
Nicholas.
What?
Rude.
Nicholas.
I'm going to go do my nails since we're switching roles today.
Why are you leaving your gun on the couch?
For you.
Oh, it's a tax write-off. You'd know that if you knew how to do my job.
Ooh.
I could do his job better.
Quack.
I can do this.
Maybe this is why it was long.
Yeah, I'd rather go shopping.
Yep. Well, there you go.
I'm doing your job.
Always easy until you're the one that
Come
actually
do your
wants to do it.
job.
Anyways, this video is brought to you by Delete Me. All right, here's the deal. It's pretty straightforward. It's an online subscription service. You give them money, they turn around and make sure that online data brokers aren't selling your personal information. These data brokers are legally required to delete your information if you submit an opt-out request. Unfortunately, there's a bunch of different data brokers.
Oh, and by the way, if you can't see it, the code is Electrician.
They all accept opt-out requests a bunch of different ways, and they make it as hard as humanly possible. But when you have Delete Me, not only do they figure out which data brokers have your information, they automatically submit opt-out requests so that they have to delete it, and then they continue to monitor those same data brokers in case they somehow get your information again. I actually like Delete Me so much that I upgraded to the family plan, and I'm now getting all my wife's information taken off the internet as well. So if you wanted to give it a try too, I'm gonna have a link and a discount code down below that's gonna save you 20%. Let's get back to the video.
Los Baños.
All right, important background info. December 7th, 1941, the Japanese commit the ultimate sin of fucking with America's boats when they attack Pearl Harbor. Most people are familiar with this. However, most people don't realize that immediately after the attack on Pearl Harbor, the Japanese launched attacks all throughout the Pacific. Among the many places attacked was the Philippines, which, if you don't know, at this point in time was an American colony that America had acquired after the Spanish-American War in 1898. So because of that, there's both American and Filipino military there. However, there's
By the way, somebody told me pretty recently that when I was in the Navy, there were a lot of Filipinos in the Navy because they had some kind of program where they would be able to join the Navy, which is cool. Filipino Mafia, go. Yeah, I heard that program ended, so I don't know if that's true or not, but that would kind of suck because I really like those Filipino dudes.
Simply isn't enough
And
of
they
them.
win,
They're
man.
completely overrun by the Japanese military. After several weeks, it becomes very clear to the U.S. military and the Filipino government that they are probably not going to be able to defend the capital of Manila from the Japanese if it comes to that. So they have two options. They can A, decide to fight it out there anyways and make it as painful as possible to the Japanese, make them fight block by block,
brick by brick,
house by house, building by building, and make it a horrific, bloody affair. Or B, they can agree to simply leave Manila intact completely, declaring it an open city and allowing the Japanese to take it over without a fight, hopefully preserving the city and as many civilians as possible, which is exactly what they decide to do on December 26th, 1941. Okay, but here's the problem with that. Remember, the Philippines is an American colony and Manila is the big, beautiful city capital. So because of that, there's a ton of Americans that live there.
If you plan on going to the Philippines, there's better cities and little villages and towns to go to.
which are
putting
just
that out
living
there.
there in some temporary professional capacity. There's doctors, teachers, nurses, diplomats, business people. There's also a bunch of representation from the Catholic Church, and a lot of the priests and nuns happen to be American. Regardless, there is a ton of American citizens that are left behind in Manila when the Japanese take over. Because of this, the Japanese decide that they're going to take the local college, Santo Tomas University. They are going to convert it into an internment camp and stick all of the Americans inside of it. While the Americans did make up the majority of the camp, there were some British, French, Polish, people from Spain, Mexico, Canada, pretty much any other person that the Japanese could look at and go, hey, you're not from
Japanese.
here. And they stuck him in Santo Tomas as well. So that's horrible news. And the only kind of silver lining they have is that these are not POWs. These are civilian internees, which the Japanese looked at a little bit different. You see, the Japanese still believed in this Bushido code of honor, where if you surrendered on the battlefield, you basically forfeit your human rights and you were subhuman and they could do whatever they wanted to you. They looked at civilian internees a little bit different. These weren't warriors that surrendered on the battlefield and had lost their honor. This was primarily elderly men, women, and children. So they were treated slightly more charitable than POWs, but it still was not a great time.
Yeah, probably
This
not
extra
good.
consideration for them being civilians varied from camp to camp, from place to place, because they had civilian internment camps all over the world. So every camp was very different. The Japanese had no standard operating procedures for how they treated their civilian internees or their POWs. You were very much at the will of whoever the Japanese officer in charge was. And in the case of Santo Tomas, it was actually one of the better ones to be at. Bear in mind, I'm not saying it was good. Nobody was having a good time. Still a horrible place to be. But on the scale or the spectrum of being in a Japanese internment or POW camp, this was one of the better.
Sorry if I scratched myself. I just got done at the gym. I'm dirty and sweaty and disgusting, as you all know. Just normally.
Ones, which at the end of the day isn't saying a whole lot. Now, the reason it was better was because the Japanese had like a real loose control of it. Basically, they put a fence up, told all the Americans to stay inside the fence, and we're going to bring you food. If you try to escape, we'll kill you. That was pretty much how it went down. They allowed the Filipino people, the civilians, to bring the Americans extra food. The Filipino people were great to the American internees as much as they could be. They tried to deliver their mail. They were trying to give them anything and everything they possibly could, and the Japanese allowed that to happen. So that's what kind of made it more tolerable than a lot of other camps. But as World War II progressed and the Japanese Empire got weaker and weaker, conditions in the internment camp and really all of Manila as a whole got worse. Supply lines broke down. Manila's a big city. You have to bring in a ton of supplies to sustain a city. So not only did the Japanese military not have enough resources to divert to this internee camp, but the Filipino civilians weren't able to give as much either, leading to way worse conditions. It was overcrowded. There wasn't enough food to go around. So the main problem is they can't get the food from the farms into the city. So what if we take the internees and move them out of the city and just put them on the farm where the food grows? Then we don't even have to move the food as far. We just got to move the people one time, right? That makes sense. So that's what they do. They build a new internment camp. It is 40 miles out into the country. It is in a place called Los Baños, right off Laguna de Bay, the biggest lake in the Philippines. It is a naturally beautiful area. There's a ton of naturally thriving tropical fruit like bananas and coconuts.
Whoa.
And there's also a bunch of agricultural villages that are going to be able to
nice.
help get food for all the internees. And that's basically how the Japanese pitched this to the internees. Hey, it's basically going to be a happy summer camp. You guys are all going to go hang out in tropical paradise, eat bananas, and hang out till the war's over. Some people buy it and they volunteer to go to this new internment camp. A lot of people aren't really buying it. And amongst the people that aren't buying it are the medical professionals. None of the medical professionals, none of the doctors, none of the nurses want to go to this new internment camp. They want to stay put. And just as the first batch of internees were getting ready to ship out to the new internment camp at Los Baños, and it looked like they were going to have no medical staff, finally a doctor by the name of Dr. Dana Nance and 11 naval nurses that would later come to be known as the Sacred 11 would volunteer to go with them. When it was all said and done, 2,147 internees would end up living at the Los Baños internment camp. And in the beginning, similar to Santo Tomas, things are pretty okay, bearing everything in mind. And once again, the local Filipinos are being a huge help. They're literally bringing in carts and carts of food every day to help get these internees more and more calories. And then a change of command happens. They put this guy in charge by the name of Haiwanaka, and he's this washed up Japanese officer that is just completely hands off. He's not there at all. The dude doesn't even get in his uniform anymore. He literally just walks around camp all day with his sandals in his kimono. Doesn't give a shit about anything.
Cool.
So his second in charge is basically running the show. And his second in command is a man by the name of Sadaki Konishi, and he is
mean.
He's evil. There's no other way to put it. Immediately upon coming to power, he cuts the internees' rations to 800 calories a day, not because he needed to, not because he didn't have the supplies. He had all the food in the world. He just simply wanted to do it to see people suffer.
What a jerk. Hey, I know the Lord says not not to judge lest ye be judged, but the guy's a real jerk. It's a little Norm Macdonald. If you don't know, 1,500 calories a day, you will burn that just by like sitting and doing nothing all day. 800 calories. That's not good.
He no longer allowed the Filipino locals to bring in extra food. This is an internment camp with men and women commingling. Naturally, over the course of months and years, they would form relationships, and every once in a while, a woman would get pregnant. And there were, at times, multiple women pregnant or multiple small children in the internment camp at Los Baños. Because of that, the Red Cross would send dehydrated milk to the camp to give to these small children. Konishi would have his men dump the dehydrated milk out on the ground in front of starving mothers to literally starve babies. Whenever the Japanese chain of command would deliver fruit or vegetables, any type of produce as part of the rations, he would leave it outside for days in the sun, letting it get infested with insects before finally letting the internees pick through it and eat whatever they could. This went on for months and years, and he would continually cut rations more and more for whatever he deemed to be a transgression until the internees were eating only 400 calories a day. And as if starving thousands of people wasn't bad enough, Konishi would constantly taunt them the entire time, never letting them forget that the only reason they were in this condition was because he said so. On one occasion, he told the men that he had 100-pound bags of rice in a storage building across camp and that they could have it if the men would carry it over to the barracks and they could cook it and eat it. So the men that had been starving and lost a third of their body weight go across camp, carry 100-pound bags of rice into the rest of the camp,
and he
for
throws
the
it
women
away.
and the children and themselves to finally be able to eat, only for Konishi to tell them that he had changed his mind and that they needed to take the rice back or he would shoot them. And then they took the rice back and locked it away. Over time, all of the internees began starving to death and showing symptoms related to it, whether it be parasites from eating things they shouldn't be eating, a malnutrition disease known as beriberi, dysentery, or scurvy. Dr. Nance and the Sacred 11.
That just made me really sad. Jesus, that's awful. What a jerk, like I said.
Were doing everything they could to help everybody, but ultimately they too were starving to death. There's a lot of different accounts of how bad it got at Los Baños, but the one that stands out the most is when a Catholic priest told everybody that the only way to get out of this now was with the help of God and that they all needed to pray. And one of the nuns there said that if they were going to get out of this alive, God was going to have to send the angels to come get them. February 1943, 1 month before Los Baños would receive its first internees, the United States military activated a new unit, the 11th Airborne Division, aka the Angels. And just for the record, that's not me trying to be cute calling them the Angels because it makes my story go good. That's their actual nickname, and they got it for a completely different reason from anything to do with Los Baños. So the training of the 11th Airborne Division is extremely important, and that is because General Eisenhower is not impressed with how airborne units have performed in North Africa and Sicily so far, and he thinks that airborne divisions just don't need to exist anymore. No division-sized element of airborne should be a thing. He doesn't think it's effective. We don't need them. Another general that he respects and that he actually went to West Point with and is known for his entire career by the name of Major General Swing disagrees, and he volunteers to go back and train the 11th Airborne to show how effective an airborne division can be. So Major General Swing comes back to America to stand up the 11th Airborne to show how good airborne units can be, and his selection process to get into his new unit is absolutely brutal. The only men that make it through are star high school and collegiate level athletes. But Swing didn't just want a bunch of brawn, he also wanted brains. He made it a requirement that every single man in the 11th Airborne Division at its inception had to have a military IQ test score of 110 or higher. This meant that physically and intellectually, this entire division from the
I don't know if that's the ASVAB, but yeah, that's a high ASVAB if that's what that is. I don't think it is. I think... Yeah, that's a very high score. I don't think it's an ASVAB, but
leadership all the way down to the lowest ranking private were all qualified to go to officer candidate school, both mentally and physically, which is absolutely crazy. Swing only wanted the best of the best, and he actually got in trouble for kicking back so many recruits because they didn't meet his standards to be in the 11th Airborne Division. Because of that, they actually expected him to lower the standards and start letting more people in, but by then he had actually found all the men that he needed. Because airborne divisions in World War II weren't as big as regular smaller divisions. A normal division had about 15,000 men. An airborne division had about 8,000 men. They also didn't have heavy artillery. They had lighter artillery. They didn't have tanks. They had light vehicles. All the stuff they had, they could jump with. So they were lighter, but they were also faster, meaner, and smarter. So Major General Swing is basically went through like 30,000 guys and distilled out the best 8,000 dudes, just the raw talent, the best of the best, the strongest, the fastest, and the smartest. And he trains the dog shit out of these guys to be absolute monsters. He is striving to make this batch of like 19 to 23-year-old kids the best of the best, and he tells them as much. He tells these kids they're going to be able to eat nails and spit out razor blades by the time they're done with their training, and you know what? They believe him. Major General Swing was born in the 1800s. Dude fought in World War I. He's already been in theater in World War II, and he's telling them, you guys are the best of the best, and if anybody would know, it's going to be him, so they believe him. And this is where they start to get their nickname, the Angels. You see, they're overly athletic, they're above average smart, and they're getting their ego pumped up, and they're a bunch of 20-year-old kids. Naturally, when they go out on leave, they're going to be rowdy. If these guys aren't training to kick ass, they're partying. These guys are going out, getting hammered, getting in fights, getting thrown in jail every chance they get. They start fucking with the chain of command, thinking it's funny. At one point, they actually prank Major General Swing. You got to realize, General Swing is born in the 1800s. The dude fought in World War I. He's the old guy, okay? He's old school military officer at this point. And those old school military officers all played polo. That was like the boys club thing. That was like what golf is now, right? And they went out and they stole Major General Swing's polo horse as a joke. Nice. And then there was also that time that they got in trouble for spear hunting for pigs using their bayonets mounted on their M1 Grands so that they could have a barbecue. The 11th
Hey man, this is boys being boys.
Airborne guys got in so much trouble so often that it became a running joke, kind of, sort of, not really a joke, an actual point of conversation in the morning officers meeting on Monday. First order of business, how many of our little angels woke up in jail this morning? And that's where they got the nickname, the Angels. Oh, cool. And to be fair to the 11th Airborne, they weren't unique in being this rowdy. This is pretty much standard behavior for all airborne units in World War II, whether people are willing to admit it or not. I mean, for example, later in the war, the 82nd Airborne was on leave over in France, and they got so rowdy that the US military had to send out a special military police unit just to get them under control. So yeah, paratroopers are always kind of wild, but back in World War II, they were exceptionally wild. But as it turns out, when your job is to lead the way into armed conflict riding a fucking kite, that's exactly the type of guy you want doing the job, a dude that gets a little bit rowdy. Speaking of kite, that does actually kind of make the 11th Airborne a little bit unique, because you could argue that they are the most airborne unit of World War II, and that is because Major General Swing made every single man in the 11th Airborne Division double certified in both parachute and glider infantry. Okay, everybody knows what parachute infantry is. We've all seen Saving Private Ryan. We've all seen Band of Brothers. It's the guys that jump out of a plane with a parachute, right? That's easy. What a lot of people have never seen before is a military glider, and I have no idea why. If I had to guess, I would assume it's because it's hard to replicate for Hollywood inside of a movie.
I didn't even know that was a thing. Military glider. Huh.
But they were real, and they're absolutely badass. It's basically a giant kite that looks like a plane that a C-47 literally tows behind it into the battlefield. So the C-47's got a bunch of paratroopers jumping out of the side of it, and it's also towing a giant plane-sized kite that's capable of carrying like 3,700 pounds and a bunch of guys inside of it. And then as the paratroopers jump out, the gliders detach at this rope, and then they glide the rest of the way into the country, land this plane. Okay, side note, unpopular opinion, this is the most gangster vehicle of World War II, okay?
That's pretty sweet,
I don't want to have to get in a fight with? The guy that shows up for military training to partake in the biggest war the world has ever seen, and when everybody else is like, oh, I want to drive a Sherman tank, I want to serve on
be in a paper airplane,
I want to drive an Amtrak, and this motherfucker's showing up like, fuck it, I want to drive a kite into battle 12 hours before everybody else and be surrounded by the enemy. Fuck that. Sorry, I'm getting sidetracked. The point I'm trying to get to is A, gliders exist and they're cool, in case you didn't know that. And B, cool. Major General Swing makes the entire 11th Airborne Division cross-train on both. So every single man in his division can both jump out of a plane with a parachute or be towed behind a plane in a giant kite with 3,000 pounds of shit in it, which no other airborne division was doing at the time. You were either a parachute guy or you were a kite guy. So the 11th Airborne Division gets done with their training by December of 1943, and now it's time to show Eisenhower what's up. So they set up this big war game, mock mission, whatever you want to call it, known as the Knollwood Maneuver, where the 11th Airborne Division is supposed to capture an airfield. Now remember, a lot of the leadership is trying to get rid of airborne divisions. They want to prove how ineffective that this is. So this is not going to be an easy mission, okay? In order to succeed, they have to capture 13 objectives all at the same time, secure an area to land the rest of the division, capture the entire airfield, hold it for a certain amount of time, and then also be able to evacuate casualties as they go. Like, this mission has to go perfect. And that's exactly what happens. The 11th Airborne Division on the first wave drops in 4,800 guys using 200 C-47s and over 200 gliders. They absolutely crush this mission. At this point, Major General Swing and the rest of the high-ranking military officers that are kind of rooting for the airborne divisions look over at Eisenhower like a bunch of kids looking at Dad, asking if they can keep the stray dog they just found. Like, Dad, can we keep him? Look at how fucking awesome these guys are, please. And finally, Eisenhower's just like, fine, whatever, we can keep it. Okay, if you're not picking up what I'm putting down, I'm trying to tell you that the 11th Airborne has just saved the entire concept of airborne as a whole. Okay, when the average person thinks about paratroopers, they're thinking about jumping into Normandy, D-Day, Market Garden, all that stuff in the European theater. All that stuff is downstream from this, okay? All of the airborne divisions would have been disbanded, and that never would have happened were it not for the 11th Airborne proving to Eisenhower how effective airborne can be. So right out of the gate, the 11th Airborne has already changed the world, and in a small way, they are responsible for the success of every other airborne mission that came after this. So naturally, as a reward, they get sent into the European theater where they're going to get to do things like jump in on D-Day, jump in and participate in the biggest airborne operation of all time, Operation Market Garden. They're going to be remembered and celebrated, and there's going to be movies and TV shows about them, and everybody's going to know who they are. I'm just kidding. They get the distinct honor of getting sent in as the only airborne division to go into the Pacific theater, and most people have absolutely no idea who they are, and they're never talked about ever. But we're fixing that shit today. So they make their way over to the Pacific Theater, and the first place they wind up is in New Guinea. And unfortunately, at this point in time, there's a little bit of a lull in the combat because the U.S. military is gearing up for the invasion of Leyte. And until then, the 11th Airborne is just kind of in New Guinea, and they're tasked with basically unloading cargo ships at this big dock to help with the war effort because there's really no asses to be kicked right now. Now, the 11th Airborne guys are not very happy about this. You got to remember, the bunch of 20-year-old young men been training their ass off for the past year to get ready to go into a fight, had their ego pumped up by their chain of command, and now they finally make it into war, and their job is to unload a bunch of cargo ships. They're pretty disappointed. Yeah. So to make themselves feel better, they steal shit. I mean,
strategically acquire. I don't remember the thing. They take it, but yeah, that's just like the military in general. Huh? Hurry up and wait. That's generally how things go.
Strategically transfer equipment to an alternate location, and by alternate location, I mean to their campsite. And when I say equipment, I mean pretty much anything and everything that's cool. They take it as theirs. Literally entire crates of Colt 45 1911s, booze, cigarettes, good food. They're stealing entire Jeeps and vehicles and using them at their camp. And nobody's really saying anything to them, and they're getting away with it, so they get a little bit bolder, and eventually they're like, fuck it, we're just gonna steal the generator for the dock, and we're gonna take it back to our camp and wire up our camp so we have electricity. So that's what they do. They steal the generator, bring it over to camp. General Swing catches them, and he's like, no, you guys can't be stealing that generator. Or at least you can't wire up your tents. You're going to use it to wire up my tent. And they have to go wire up General Swing's HQ building, and he uses the electricity. Now, at this point, the guy that's actually in charge of the dock goes over to General Swing's quarters to where the 11th Airborne are, and he's like, your guys are stealing fucking everything. They need to stop. I need my generator back. At which...
I mean, if it's the government's equipment, is it really stealing? You think about that. I should mull that one over.
Point, Swing gets in a huge argument and says the famous line, my angels would never do that, thus cementing in their nickname, the Angels. Shortly after that, the 11th Airborne would get orders that they were going to partake in the invasion of Leyte, and they would have to leave a bunch of their stolen goods behind. An MP unit came in to clean up their camp and reported back that there was an entire parking lot of stolen vehicles there.
Hell yeah.
So, Battle of Leyte, we talked about this last week with the 77th Infantry, aka the Old Bastards. They were there as well. But if you don't remember, or if you didn't watch that video, basically the Japanese government has come out and said that they're going to make the Battle of Leyte a decisive battle in the war. They are throwing anything and everything they have at this fight to not lose this island. Basically, the American forces have one half of the island, the Japanese forces have the other half, and they're both being resupplied on their back ends and fighting in the middle, trying to claim this island. Eventually, the 77th Infantry Division would be sent around the backside of the island to make an amphibious landing and take over Ormoc Bay, which is where the Japanese were getting their resupply from, cutting off the enemy supply lines, while the rest of the Army and Marine units held the line, including the 11th Airborne, and continued to fight. The 11th Airborne Division and every other unit that fought at Leyte sustained heavy casualties, but for every single Angel that fell on that battlefield, he took with him 45 enemy soldiers. After claiming victory at Leyte, the next objective to take is Luzon, the main island in the Philippines with the capital of Manila and the Los Baños internment camp. With this being the main island, there's no doubt that the Japanese are looking to make this a decisive battle as well. Luckily, 3 months prior to this, MacArthur had already sent someone to begin prepping the stage for an American victory at Luzon.
Vanderpool.
Now, rewind like 5 months prior to the Battle of Leyte, and MacArthur is still headquartered back in Australia, and he finds out that there are a bunch of guerrilla groups all over the Philippines, especially on the main island of Luzon. Now, these guerrilla fighting units kind of operated like gangs. Each one had their own little chunk of territory, and they all weren't very friendly with one another because they were all kind of competing with one another to get aid from the U.S. military to be able to fight the Japanese better. So they were very disorganized, but some units were much more organized than others. So General MacArthur figures that if he can send somebody in there to help organize the guerrillas and then get them more supplies and more weapons, they'll be softening up the Japanese from the inside. So by the time the U.S. forces reach Luzon, it won't be as hard of a fight as it needs to be. So he starts taking volunteers, starts poking around. Finally, he figures out the guy that he wants to send in, and it's this badass major by the name of J. Vanderpool. So he takes Vanderpool, sends him off to do a bunch of training in like how to set up long-range communication, how to set up communication networks, basically the quick and dirty on how to be a fucking spy. So that training takes about 2 months. We are now 3 months away from the Battle of Leyte, and Jay and a couple of other guys are now going to get snuck into Luzon by submarine and dropped off on the island. They have one person they can link up with for a connection, but basically their standing orders are, and I quote, "Do what will best further the Allied cause." Signed, General MacArthur.
Do
Literally
anything.
the top dog of the U.S. military. The only person with more authority than General MacArthur at this point is the President of the United States, okay? This dude's orders are basically the golden ticket, the blank check of do whatever you want, just be a menace to the enemy. So first order of business, he finds out who the best guerrillas on Luzon are, and it's this group called Hunters ROTC. It's ran by a bunch of ex-Filipino army guys that are actually coordinating their men like an actual military. They have a chain of command, they have order, they actually do military tactics, they are conducting legitimate guerrilla warfare, and they are fucking good. They've got 2,500 men, and they are a gigantic pain in the Japanese ass. So Jay needs to get linked up with them, get them more organized, and get them more supplies, more guns, more ammo, more food, more water, more everything. He needs to hook these guys up so they can be an even bigger pain in the ass. The problem is they're like 60 miles away on the other side of the island, and Jay is like a 5'10" white guy. All the other white people have been thrown in internment camps, and on top of that, he's wearing a U.S. military uniform. The odds of him making it 60 miles through enemy territory on this island, not looking too great. So what's Jay gonna do? I mean, the meatheads are probably like, I mean, he could just walk there through the jungle, avoid the roads, don't go into town. He'll get there in 2 weeks. It'll be fine.
Could he ask to go through, or I don't know. I'm trying to think of like the stupidest thing. Like, can I just walk through? Yeah, go over.
Get the job done. Other people are like, he could probably, pay somebody to drive him there in a trunk, smuggle him in. That would be an option. Jay Vanderpool is just like, nah, I'm going to go just complete gangster option. I'm going to walk to the nearest town, go to a payphone. I'm going to call up a fucking limo to drive me there. So that's what he does. He calls a valet service, and some fancy black SUV comes pulling up, and they're like, cool, give me a ride 60 miles away to wherever the Hunter ROTC people are. And the limo driver, SUV driver, whatever you want to call him, taxi driver, is like, I don't want to give you Americans a ride. If the Japanese catch me, they're going to kill me. At which point Vanderpool and his guys are like, look, this SUV is taking me to where I need to go. You can take this stack of cash and give me your car, or you can take this stack of cash, you can drive me there, drop me off, and then you can keep your car. Either way, this SUV is taking me to where I'm going. Are you driving or not? So the driver's like, fine, I'll do it. They drive all the way there. They pass through multiple Japanese checkpoints. Because it's such a fancy vehicle, the Japanese don't even bother to stop them. They just salute and wave them through, assuming that it's somebody important. It is fucking so stupid that it's genius all at the same time. It's incredible that it worked. It's the funniest fucking part of this story. So this happens multiple times, and they make it all the way to the village where Hunters ROTC is located. And when they get out, the leadership of Hunters ROTC just sees Americans in American military uniforms getting out of like this dope black SUV 60 miles inland into enemy territory. So the guerrilla leaders are thinking like, oh shit, these guys are gangster as fuck.
Look badass. That's really badass, guys. That's dangerous.
So already they're off to a great foot due to Vanderpool's insane strategy of calling a limo to drive him through enemy territory. And then Vanderpool whips out his printed out order from General MacArthur, basically saying, do whatever to further the Allied cause, at which point the guerrillas are just completely game to do whatever. They're more than happy to help in any way they can because they know who General MacArthur is, and this is their best shot at making a measurable impact to save their country. So Jay Vanderpool has been in Luzon for all of like 6 hours, and he is now essentially in charge of 2,500 men that are experts in jungle warfare. Now, these guys have been an issue the entire time, but they're so under-equipped that they weren't able to do as much as they could. Like, they're not living up to their full potential because these guys are going in and launching raids against the Japanese, and every guy has like 3 bullets in his gun because they just don't have ammo. Then they're whipping out their bolo knives and using those to fight the Japanese. Now, with Jay, he's going to be calling in and getting them new guns and a ton of ammunition so they can actually function like a guerrilla fighting force. And they are going to get escalated from an issue to a fucking problem for the Japanese. Then over the course of the next 3 months, while the 11th Airborne is in New Guinea and fighting in Leyte, Vanderpool is in Luzon getting his guerrilla network even bigger. He's getting more guerrilla units to cooperate with him, and he's getting them guns and ammo as well. And he builds this entire command structure that he calls the GGC, the General Guerrilla Command. And then he teaches all of them how to gather intel, spy on the Japanese, and send long-range communications. So now, not only is his guerrilla fighting force a guerrilla fighting force, but they're doubling as a spy network as well. In the span of 3 months, Jay Vanderpool has essentially turned himself into the guerrilla warlord of the Philippines. So fast forward January 9th, 1945, American forces were victorious at Leyte, and now they are making their invasion into Luzon with like 175,000 men. It is a massive offensive operation.
That a lot of
and
people.
Jay Vanderpool, our favorite guerrilla warlord, has positioned all of his guerrilla fighters in between the American landings and the Japanese main forces. So that way, when the Japanese try to make their way to the beaches where the Americans are landing, they're going to be attacking them on the roads with ambushes the entire time, softening the enemy before they even get there to play defense. And here's what I need you to understand about this. This is 1945. The Japanese are not winning this war. It's not going good for them
it's a little
at
too
all.
late.
Their supply lines are breaking down. They're having trouble getting their men ammunition, food. Everything is going about as bad as it can be for the Japanese at this point in time. Okay, if you're not picking up what I'm putting down, I'm trying to tell you that the Japanese are now the ones that probably aren't going to have a whole lot of ammo, and now the guerrillas are being backed by America, the biggest unhealth care network the world has ever seen.
Sorry, let me stretch a little bit. This is a this is a very long video, and my back hurts. Whew. All right, let's we all stretched out. Everybody, do some like arm circles or whatever. All right, good.
They've got all the ammo on the planet.
Well. How the turntables...
Now, Jay Vanderpool, being the smart guy that he is, he knows this and he takes advantage of it. He has the guerrillas just start mag dumping everybody. He tells them, you guys have more ammo than them, abuse it. He even goes as far as to have the guerrillas start using an old school infantry tactic called marching fire, which is basically get a bunch of your guys, have them stand in a line and start walking towards the enemy with their rifles on their hip, and every time their right foot hits the ground, they fire. Now, this is like a World War I tactic, the theory being that you're both advancing and laying your own suppressing fire at the same time, obviously, as you were marching towards an entrenched enemy with machine guns. So the tactic never really worked that great. But in World War II, in this application, when the enemy's just out on an open road and they don't have enough ammunition to lay suppressing fire back, it worked out great. In addition to that, there was also a huge psychological factor because you got to remember, Jay Vanderpool's like coordinating the guerrillas. I keep referring to him as the leader, but he's not actually in charge. The real guerrilla leaders could tell Jay Vanderpool to get fucked at any point in time, and he would have no other choice but to do so. And the reason I'm bringing this up is I'm trying to get the message across to you that these Filipino guerrilla fighters don't really give a shit about the Geneva Convention. They've never even heard of them. Believe me, you would much rather come toe-to-toe with the American military at this point in time because these Filipino guerrillas were not taking prisoners and they were not messing around. They are experts in jungle warfare, and they do not like the Japanese. The Japanese have been extremely cruel to the Filipino people for the last 3 years of the occupation.
Yeah, I met a couple of people who were in like the actual Filipino like military. Those guys are tough, man. You don't mess with those dudes. Yeah, crazy dudes.
And
they know
and they are
screamer.
out to get straight up revenge. Like if you got shot and injured going up against the Filipino guerrillas, you weren't injured for very long because as soon as you hit the ground, the bolo knives are coming out and these guys are looking at you like my wife looks at Amazon packages, okay? And every single time I bring something like this up, I get this in the comment section.
Buh.
That's a war crime. Buh. To which I mean, yeah, sure, I guess, but I mean, what do you think is going to happen? Because you say it with this conviction like you think RoboCop is going to descend from the heavens and enforce justice. Because I hate to break it to you in your fragile worldview, but guess how many Filipino guerrillas got convicted of war crimes after World War II? Absolutely fucking zero. Okay, now look, I'm not saying that's right. I'm just saying that it happened. And to be honest with you, I'm not that upset about it. I mean, we've all seen those situations, right? It's not appropriate to punch somebody in the face, but also, if you're at the bar with your wife and some dude walks up, smacks your wife on the ass, and says, hey, sweetheart, how would you like to go home with a real man? And you turn around and punch that motherfucker in the face, fucking nah. He kind of deserved it. And if you don't like that, that's fine. We can agree to disagree. But guess what? The good news in all of this is it's easily avoidable. All you have to do is not invade the Philippines and then go out of your way to be evil and cruel to all the locals for no fucking reason. And this probably won't happen.
Then I don't want
okay?
to.
Simplest concept in the world. I know a lot of people struggle with it. I'm going to say it real slow. Don't fuck around and you won't find out, okay?
I hope that this lesson is helpful. Thank you.
Sorry, I'm getting sidetracked. Moral of the story, the Filipino guerrillas are out in the jungle being complete gangsters going up against the Japanese. Now, after a while, it gets to the point where Vanderpool's contact is like, yo, you need to chill. You're expending so much ammo that the general whose AO that you're inside of is going to get mad that you're taking up some of his ammo, and you just need to slow it down because you're burning up too much. To which his guy's like, I don't know, it's some hard ass by the name of General Swing who's in charge of the 11th Airborne Division.
The real
to which Vanderpool
swinger.
is like, cool, you send General Swing down here. He can see my results, speak for themselves, and we'll see what he has to say. So it's a date. The next morning, General Swing is going to have his driver bring him out to where Vanderpool is, and they're going to have a little conversation about how much ammunition he's burning up. But before that happens, that night, the guerrillas set up guarding a particular road, and as it would happen, right at dusk, an entire Japanese battalion comes marching down this road, advancing towards the American lines. The guerrillas launch an ambush and wipe out the entire battalion, 1,000 men. So the next morning, General Swing comes rolling down the very same road with his driver and his aide in his car and an armed escort, and he gets about halfway there and he starts noticing there's an awful lot of opened Amazon packages, I mean dead guys, on the side of the road. And the closer he gets to where Vanderpool's supposed to be, the more and more of them there are. And after a little bit, General Swing just tells his driver, all right, turn this shit around. He leans over to his aide and says, and I quote, you give Vanderpool all the goddamn ammunition he wants. So this continues for about a month as the American forces fight their way through Luzon to Manila. So Battle of Manila kicks off February 3rd, 1945, and the first order of business is to liberate Santo Tomas internment camp, and that also happens on February 3rd. And what they find at Santo Tomas is absolutely horrific. The conditions of the camp have done nothing but gone down since 1943, and the conditions that they are living in 1945 are very similar to what I've already highlighted when I talked about Los Baños previously. Because of this, General MacArthur himself decides that he needs to see this with his own eyes, so he goes and visits Santo Tomas and immediately decides that his next order of business is to liberate the Los Baños internment camp immediately, and he gives that order directly to General Swing in the 11th Airborne Division. Okay, I need you to understand, that's a really big deal. General MacArthur is like top dog in the military. It's President, MacArthur, everybody else. MacArthur doesn't tell individual divisions or units what to do. He doesn't give those kinds of orders. He tells entire military branches what to do, and those orders get disseminated down through the ranks amongst the different generals, and it goes through like a whole chain of command thing. He has just skipped several rungs of the command structure to give this order directly to General Swing, which speaks volumes as to what MacArthur thinks of the 11th Airborne, because he thinks that they are the exact people for the job, and he doesn't want the chain of command to fuck that up. So while the 11th Airborne Division is actively fighting in Manila, they are also beginning to make preparations to somehow rescue an internment camp that is 40 miles away.
The plan.
So right out of the gate, Vanderpool sends a bunch of guerrillas over to Los Baños. They're going to be living in the jungle 24/7, keeping an eye and keeping tabs on the internment camp and reporting back any intel they have. In addition to that, the guerrillas also have standing orders to make an emergency attack and try to save
I'm available for voice acting, by the way. Just
as many internees as possible if they need to. The reason for that is because there's a pretty big and pretty legitimate concern that if the Japanese are going to abandon that internment camp, that they would try to execute all the prisoners first. And in the unfortunate event of that happening, the guerrillas have the orders to attack and try to save as many people as possible. Now, with the planning of this mission, bear in mind that the 11th Airborne is still fighting actively in the Battle of Manila. And while that's going on, they're also trying to plan this mission, and this mission is seemingly impossible. Now, the planning of this mission is done by a young officer in the 11th Airborne Airborne known as Henry Mueller, and his plan is absolutely genius. Okay, so here's the initial problem. Los Baños is 40 miles behind enemy lines, and there is an entire infantry division between the Americans and this internment camp, approximately 10,000 Japanese soldiers known as the Tiger Division. So if the Americans launch a major offensive and try to punch through and destroy that division, they're going to radio back to Los Baños, and they're worried that that means that they're going to execute all the prisoners. So that's not really an option, meaning the only thing they can do is do an airborne operation where they jump in right on top of the internment camp. So Mueller starts getting intel back from the guerrillas, and they have this hand-drawn map of the camp and the surrounding area, and there's this big-ass field about 1,000 yards away from the Los Baños internment camp, and it is big enough for them to be able to land an entire company of paratroopers there. But you still have the issue of the C-47s have to fly overhead, the company has to jump out of the planes, float down, land, get their shit together, and run as fast as they can 1,000 yards, get into the internment camp, and stop the guards. So they figure that at best, that's gonna be about 15 minutes from the moment the paratroopers jump out of the plane to the moment that they're able to land, ditch their parachutes, grab their guns, and full assholes and elbows sprint all the way to the internment camp. That is still too long. That is 15 minutes where the Japanese have the opportunity to shoot as many people as possible. Easy solution, they're gonna send in the 11th Airborne Division's recon platoon, which is like 11th Airborne Division is already above average. The recon platoon is their best guys on top of it. They're gonna send in their recon platoon. They're gonna link up with 800 guerrilla fighters, and they are gonna be sitting right outside of Los Baños. And the second the C-47s fly overhead, they're gonna launch an attack, and they're gonna fight the guards in the internment camp, meaning that the guards are gonna have to take up all their time fighting them as opposed to executing prisoners, and give the airborne guys enough time to get there to reinforce them, and they can overrun the camp. So this mission is already crazy. There's a lot of moving parts, but Mueller just has to assume that everything goes according to plan, because from there, it gets even harder. So when we assume that this is all went according to plan, this means that the guards have all been taken care of, and there's now approximately like 1,100-ish soldiers there between the guerrillas and the American forces, and there's approximately 2,100 internees that are in their final stages of starving to death, and they now have to transport that 2,100 people 40 miles away, and they don't have any vehicles. So that in itself is a huge logistical issue, but then you have to also add on to the fact that there is 10,000 Japanese Tiger Division soldiers blocking the route to get back to where you need to go. So at this point, Henry Mueller's like, you know what? We're just gonna do some gangster shit. We're gonna drive our tanks through the biggest lake in the Philippines to get there. So in addition to the guerrillas and the recon platoon waiting in the bushes for their moment to attack, the paratroopers falling from the sky, there is also gonna be an entire battalion of amphibious tractors, Amtraks, floating tanks that are gonna drive across Laguna de Bay, the biggest lake in the Philippines, and then drive 2 miles further inland to hit up Los Baños, and then they are gonna be the ones that smash through the gate, and they are gonna pick up all the internees and drive them back across the lake into friendly territory. It's genius. The only problem at this point is that they don't have enough Amtraks to be able to load up everybody at the internment camp. So when the Amtraks do show,
I'm guessing they're going to have to make multiple trips. It's like when you're carrying groceries and you just want to load up, But yeah, I'm guessing that's what's going to happen.
Up in Los Baños, they're going to load up all the kids, all the women, and the men that are the sickest and unable to walk the 2 miles to Laguna de Bay. Then the Amtraks are going to take off, drive/sail all the way back across the biggest lake of the Philippines, drop people off, turn around, head back across it again to go pick up everybody else. And that's the problem, because while they're waiting with their backs to a giant body of water, that infantry division, the Tiger Division of 10,000 angry Japanese soldiers, are going to have time to make it back to the internment camp, track them down, and presumably slaughter everybody, because they're not going to stand a chance. It would be 10-1, and these guys are going to be showing up with tanks, mortars, and artillery. So in order to address that, they're going to build up a massive American force right on the front line, directly in front of this Japanese Tiger Division, effectively forcing them to have a Mexican standoff with the American division. And this is going to put the Japanese leadership in the position of like, I know that there's a prison raid going on directly behind me, but if I turn around to address it, this entire American army is going to kick my ass. So they're effectively just going to have to sit there in this staring contest and let this raid go on behind them, even though they know it's happening. It's genius. Mueller is effectively playing 4D chess. So Henry Mueller takes his plan to General Swing, lays it all out, and General Swing is like, Okay, let's do it. It should work. The problem is we can't do it yet because we don't have enough manpower. We're still fighting the Battle of Manila, and we've taken so many casualties between Leyte, fighting down through Luzon, and now the Battle of Manila. We just don't have the guys to spare right now, but we're gonna do it as soon as we can. So they're forced to kick the can down the road for like 2 weeks, and during this 2 weeks, somebody from Los Baños escapes the prison camp and makes
Sorry about all the yawning. I don't mean to do it. I'm running on very little sleep, and I just got done working out. I'm exhausted.
their way over to the 11th Airborne's area
Heads
of
up.
operation, and they get picked up, and Mueller hears about it. So Mueller wants to talk to this guy. He wants to know everything about the camp. Maybe he's missing something. Maybe there's something he could do to make his plan better, make it more effective, save more people. So Mueller brings this guy into his office, and they start talking, and this guy he's brilliant. He's memorized everything. He was previously an engineer, and this dude went as far as pacing off different buildings. He actually had measurements of how far it is from the gate to this building, from this building to that building. He knew where every machine gun emplacement was. He was able to draw out a very accurate map, every guard tower, everything. So that
That's
alone was a
crazy.
huge help. But in addition to that, Mueller wanted to know the schedule. He wanted to know the daily life of everybody living in Los Baños. So he has him walking through an entire day. Like, when you wake up, tell me
Take a
everything that happens.
piss,
What's the patterns? What are the guards up to?
drink of water.
What's the deal? At this point, the gentleman informs Mueller that every single day it begins with most of the guards, like 99% of them, all but like 20 dudes that they leave at the guard towers, proceed to go lock all their guns in their barracks, and then they go out in the field next to the internment camp in their underwear and sandals and do calisthenics. They're doing stretches and push-ups and shit to stay in good fighting shape. To which Henry Mueller's like, fucking excuse me? You mean you tell me that if I time this mission right, I literally get to catch
Get 'em
these
in their
guys
underwear.
outside of the internment camp in sandals and their underwear while they're tired and sweaty? I gotta go. He goes straight to General Swing's office and he's like, hey, we got to move up the timeline for this mission. The original schedule was that the paratroopers were going to be jumping out of the C-47s at 8 o'clock in the morning, and Henry is like, we got to bump that back. They got to jump out at 7 in the morning, right in the middle of these guys doing push-ups in their underwear. We're literally going to catch the enemy with their pants down. Now, the
Sweet.
reason he had to go all the way to General Swing to get this approved was because before that, the earliest they could be there was 8 o'clock in the morning. The reason for that was because they wanted the C-47s to have the light of dawn to be able to take off, just because it's easier getting that many planes in the air when everybody can see and it's not dark out. But everybody pretty much agreed, this is worth it. We're going to do it anyways. So that's the plan. The plan is set in stone. We just have to wait until we have the manpower to actually pull it off. And then several things happen. The first one being that a local farmer and fisherman is sailing his boat around Laguna de Bay, and he ends up seeing the Los Baños prison camp or prisoners from it somehow, and he reports back to the Americans how sickly and how poorly they are being treated. So that's number one. The secondary thing that happens is Vanderpool's guerrillas report back that the Japanese are digging a massive hole in the ground, a humongous trench. And at the top of it are machine gun
that's never
emplacements,
good.
and everybody assumes the worst, that they are digging a mass grave. So that's it. Time to shit or get off the pot. We're doing this, and we're doing it right now. Get that big military force built up right in front of the Tiger Division so they can start their Mexican standoff. Get the recon platoon out in the jungle with the guerrillas and spool up the C-47s. And for the love of God, somebody turn on Fortunate Son while we do it. I don't care if it doesn't come out till 1969 and it's February 23rd, 1945. Just
Wait, what is this? This is not the real song playing in the background. Okay. Well, I would imagine.
make it happen.
Burn it. Oh no, the rain.
Early morning, February 23rd, 1945. All of the 11th Airborne Division guys start.
I feel like I could have done that better. Chapter 4. Chapter 4, The Raid. No, that's terrible. It's not good.
Early morning, February 23rd, 1945. All of the 11th Airborne Division guys start loading on to the C-47s. Now, originally they had just slotted one company to go in and make this jump, but a lot more than just one company worth of guys ends up showing up. Now, I can't prove this with any official military document. They weren't on the manifest, but it was very much one of those situations where everybody in the 11th Airborne Division wanted to be on this mission, okay? They'd already been through hell together. They fought through Leyte. They fought through Luzon. They're in the Battle of Manila, and they had freed Santo Tomas, and all of them had seen the horrors that were happening inside of that POW camp, and absolutely everybody wanted to help. So more guys showed up, whether they were supposed to or not, and they jumped as well. So they load up into the C-47s, they take off. Problem, one of the C-47's landing gear won't retract back up into the plane. Apparently, in the darkness of night, one of the maintainers on the ground forgot to pull the locking pin out of the landing gear.
Oh,
and now
well.
they can't pull the landing gear up, meaning they can't get up to speed, they are going to miss the hit time.
Attention to
right out of the gate,
detail,
that's
sir.
a big fucking problem. I mean, it's only one of the planes, so it's got approximately like 28 paratroopers in it, but in a mission this small, 28 guys can be a make or break amount of dudes. And we don't have time to turn around, pull the pin out, and get that plane back up into the air. We can't have all of the C-47s slow down because then none of them will make their hit time. And they all have to be there when they're supposed to be there because those Amtraks are showing up on time. The recon platoon and the guerrillas are showing up on time. And most importantly, we got to catch the enemy literally with their pants down in a field doing push-ups. At this point, the pilots are like, fuck it, I'm just going to floor it the entire way there with the landing gear down. I'll just beat the atmosphere into submission for the next 40 miles, to which the radio tower is like, you're going to blow an engine if you do that. And the pilots respond with, well, let's hope I blow it on the way back. And I think we can all agree that's gangster as fuck. Well, that's going on. The recon platoon and the scouts are going and they're getting into position. And one of the recon guys, a guy by the name of Terry Santos, as he's coming up to the camp, approaches this guard hut that's like kind of right out in the middle of nowhere. It's like an early warning system. And inside of it's just one man sleeping on his gun, and he's got a field phone in his other hand. And Terry pulls out his knife. He's going to kill this guy.
Oh, boy.
But then he stops. He realizes that this guy's out there as an early warning system. He's probably got to check in every hour, every half hour, every 15 minutes. He has no idea. And if this guy misses a check-in, it's going to put the entire camp on alert. So he resheathes his knife and just sneaks past him. Okay, side note, luckiest Japanese soldier in the entire story, and he's being a complete shitbag. So all I'm saying, sometimes being a shitbag could save your life. I mean, what's the shitbag's creed? Never stand when you could sit, never sit when you could lay down, and never be awake when you could be asleep. Yeah. This just saved this guy's life. Anyways, the scouts and the guerrillas, they all go out, they get in position. Thanks to the new drawn map from the previous escapee, they know where every single guard tower and guard hut is. And there are scouts literally sitting outside of them on the other side of the wall, next to the windows with grenades, waiting to hear the C-47s coming up. And they're just gonna toss grenades into all the guard checkpoints and take out all the guards at once immediately. So they're in position and they're waiting, and it feels like forever, but it's probably only like 5 or 10 minutes. And they're waiting, and then they start to hear the faint drone of the C-47s off in the distance, and they keep waiting until it gets louder and louder. And then as soon as the Japanese guys out working in the field turn to start looking up towards the sky, they attack. Every guard hut on the ground gets a grenade through the window. Every guard tower gets raked with machine gun fire. Terry Santos runs in, and the barracks that has all the guns inside of it, and he throws white phosphorus grenades inside, lighting the entire building on fire so that they can't even retrieve their guns if they wanted to. Another scout runs up to the commandant's office where the man in charge is supposed to be, and the only Japanese man in there runs and jumps out the window of the second-story building, and allegedly the scout shoots him out of midair with his Colt 45.
Nice shooting, Terry.
Some of the guards try to fight, the paratroopers show up, and all in all, this entire affair is quick, violent, and over, with somewhere between 70 and 80 of the Japanese guards being killed in action, and the remainder of them fled off into the wood line in their underwear and sandals.
Nice.
So it's going perfect. Everything is gone 100% according to plan. Next thing you know, the Amtraks drive right through the front gate. They roll up, their guys get out, they start trying to help load people into the Amtraks so they can all get out of there. And here's where things go off the rails. You see, what they didn't anticipate in this plan was a lack of cooperation from all the internees. And to be fair, they're not trying to be difficult. They don't want to not cooperate, but they don't realize the gravity of the situation. In their mind, you gotta remember, they're starving, they're hungry, they've lived here for the past 3 years, this is their home. They think that the Americans have come to save them, and they are now behind friendly lines. They don't realize that they're 40 miles deep behind enemy lines, and that there's an army of 10,000 Japanese soldiers coming to potentially kill them at any moment. And the army guys don't exactly have time to explain that to 2,100 people, so they're kind of sitting over there like, guys, I need you to get on the Amtraks right now. And they're like running back to the barracks like, oh, let me go pack my bags real quick. No, we don't have time for any of that shit. It's chaos. It's a complete shit show. There's 2,100 starving people running around trying to pack their bags. There's people coming out of the barracks with furniture and mattresses and shit. The paratroopers are 100% just channeling that dad energy of like trying to get mom and the kids out of the movie theater, into the car, sit down, buckle up, shut up so I can get us out of this parking lot to beat all the traffic out of here. They're channeling that energy. And finally, they're like, no, we're not bringing any of this shit. The clothes on your back and you get on the Amtrak. We have to leave right now. And they're like, fuck it. They take white phosphorus grenades and they go and they light all the buildings on fire so that people have to get out of them because they need all of these people to fucking leave now. And amidst all the chaos, there's this famous interaction where this young woman in her 20s that's been in this internment camp the entire time comes up to one of the biggest, best looking paratroopers there and is like, are you a Marine? And he's like, no, I'm a paratrooper, like trying to be Mr. Big Badass, right? And she's like, oh, all the time I've spent here in this internment camp, I've always dreamed about being rescued by a Marine, which is just the ultimate cherry on top of this shit Sunday. Like, hey, sorry things aren't going that great at this moment. Also, don't know if it helps. Just wanted you to know that I would rather bang a Marine.
Filipino chicks or Filipinas get what they want, you know. I would know. A lot of Navy. I've dated quite a few Filipinas. Anyway.
In addition to that, there was a bunch of Catholic priests and nuns that had dropped to their knees praying, thanking God for literally sending angels to come and save them. At which point, the angels are like, bro, do that on the Amtrak. Get up and then go take a knee in the tank so we can get this shit going, because I'm trying to actually finish saving you guys. I'm not done yet. And this is my favorite part of the story, right? Because Amtraks all have names painted on the side, right? They're like tanks. Like the crew gives their tank a funny name or a cool name or a badass name. Like Jean Lafayette Poole called his M4 Sherman tank In the Mood. Well, this particular Amtrak that they loaded up all of the Catholic priests and nuns onto, on the other side of it, its name was, and I quote, the Impatient Virgin, which is fucking hilarious. Anyways, all the Amtraks get loaded up to maximum capacity and they take off. So now we've got all the paratroopers and somewhere between 500 and 600 of the healthiest looking internees available, and they're gonna have to walk 2 miles over to the lake. Okay, now cut back to the Amtraks. They're driving to the lake and they start taking fire from the tree line. They can see the muzzle flashes off in the distance. So one of the American soldiers in one of the Amtraks is trying to get up to the 50 cal to return fire, but there's so many internees in there and nobody's listening. They're all cheering and talking and nobody can hear him. He's telling people to move, but they're not listening. So he finally just literally gets on top and crawls over people to get onto this machine gun to start returning fire. And this dude is just dumping ammunition everywhere in that general direction, literally cutting down the trees that these people are firing from. And finally, when he quits seeing muzzle flashes, he stops firing into this tree line. And as the gun falls silent and the ringing in his ears finally goes away after a couple seconds, he hears a baby crying. And he looks down and there's an internee woman that was obviously starving to death, and she was holding a 3-day-old baby named Lois. And the baby was crying because one of the hot brass casings from the 50 caliber machine gun had fallen down and burnt this little 3-day-old baby's face. And this American soldier's name was Dwight Clark, felt like the biggest piece of shit on the planet because he had just burnt this little baby's face with a brass casing. But as sad as that is, everything works out as best as it possibly could.
That almost made me want to cry. That's rough.
Because they get all of the internees across the lake, drop them off, turn back around, go pick up everybody else and bring them back safely. They got every single internee in Los Baños out of that camp. Okay, worth mentioning, prior to this mission, the chain of command always sets parameters as to what's going to deem this mission a success. And this mission being successful was if they were going to be able to liberate 1/3 of the internees, and they got all of them.
Nice.
Unfortunately, not everybody would get a happily ever after.
Not the happiest.
Among the Japanese soldiers that escaped in the first attack was Sadaki Konishi. He fled, made his way back to the Tiger Division.
That guy's a real jerk.
Later on in the coming days, he would convince the leadership of the Tiger Division to go back to the internment camp, and there was one village that was adjacent to it, and for whatever reason, he decided that that village should pay the price for his embarrassment, because apparently they would have had something to do with it, surely, even though they really didn't. More or less, the entire village was burnt to the ground and they killed everyone for the crime of simply existing near the site of their embarrassment, even though they had nothing to do with it. About a week later, American forces would win the Battle of Manila and they would continue to advance southward towards Los Baños, where they had previously been, and the 11th Airborne and the rest of the Allied forces would come face to face and see what the Japanese had done to that village because of their success during the Los Baños prison raid. For this, Sadaki Konishi was captured, tried, and sentenced to death by hanging in 1949. Which, unpopular opinion, seems like far too quick of a death for somebody that is that evil, but I don't know, maybe I'm a bad person. But the good that came out of this was that over 2,000 internees that had been tortured and starved for over 3 years would finally get to return home and live happily ever after. The Sacred 11, the naval nurses that volunteered to go and help keep all of these people alive while also living under the same conditions, were all awarded the Bronze Star and are highly regarded as heroes. The 11th Airborne Division got almost no break from the combat as they continued to finish clearing out the Philippines. The raid of Los Baños is considered to be the most perfect airborne operation that has ever been executed and is deemed as a great success. Despite that, most of you have never even heard of it, And there's one simple
never.
reason for that. On the very same day as the Los Baños raid, February 23rd, 1945, a group of Marines fashioned together a couple of drainage pipes and put the American flag on it and hoisted it over a battlefield where they were victorious at Iwo Jima. And when push came to shove, the newspapers decided to air the story that had the cooler picture. I'm gonna be honest with you guys, I have absolutely no idea how to end this video, so I'm just gonna end it with my favorite part. Fast forward to 1998, 43 years later, there's a woman by the name of Lois that gets a phone call seemingly out of the blue. She answers it, says hello, and it's an elderly man on the other line by the name of Dwight Clark, and he says, "Are you baby Lois from Los Baños?" To which she replies, "Yes." And the next thing,
pause. Okay.
thing he says is, "Do you have scars on your face?" This man fought through the Pacific in World War II. He has probably both seen and had to do horrific things to survive. And out of all of that, it has tormented this man for the past 43 years, knowing that he may have hurt a sweet, innocent little baby. And after that time, 4 decades, he finally finds out that she did not have any scars on her face. And that is probably the happiest ending with the most closure that I could possibly give you. So, thank you for watching. Best way to support the channel is go buy some merch over at thefatelectrician.com. Quack bang.
Why'd you do that to me, dude? Whew, you jerk. You made me cry like a baby. Like a baby.
Out.
You made me cry. I didn't really like
This is
that.
a really long video. I need a drink. Oh, hey,
it was
real
a
quick,
really long
one more thing.
Yeah, sure.
If you guys wanted to know more about the 11th Airborne, there's a guy that actually specializes in it by the name of Jeremy Holm. He actually helped me out with this video.
Cool.
He's written 3 books on the subject, and he has his own YouTube channel exclusively making content about the 11th Airborne. I'm going to have that link down below if you guys were interested.
All right, word up.
Other than that, I'm going to go get that beer now. See ya.
Oh, jerk, you made me cry.
Mr. Stanley Kingsbury, formerly
still
General
not
Manager
over.
of Trans-Pacific Trading Company, ex-Chief of Police and Fire Departments of Los Baños Internment Camp. Mr. Kingsbury, would you describe in your own words your reaction to your liberation on February the 23rd?
I went about my business, dressed, doing the regular duties in the room, when all of a sudden I heard the sound of planes very near, looked out of my cubicle, found first 3 planes came over one of the lower barracks. I noticed a white sheet drop out of one. I'd read a great deal about parachutes. I'd never seen them so near me before. All of a sudden, the 9 planes were letting these parachutes out. It just seems that the air was filled with them. At that time, shooting began. Japanese bullets were flying thick and fast.
Oh, this guy can
Things were
spin
pretty
a
hot there
yarn.
for about a half, 3/4 of an hour. In the meantime, the boys had come in and told us we had to evacuate. And within a question of a few minutes, we were on the M tracks, where we rolled out of the camp down to the shores of Laguna de Bay. That's the lake that was nearby, 2 kilometers away from the camp.
I imagine, Mr. Kingsbury, that you felt as if the entire United States Army was dropping on your head when they started coming.
I certainly did, and I even have to pinch myself now to realize that I am really free and can talk and do as I please.
You do anything you want to.
After 1,145 days under the Emperor from Japan, you can't realize how I feel.
No, sir, I can't. I understand, Mr. Kramer, that you were wounded by a stray Japanese bullet during the liberation.
Well, there really isn't much to say, except the bullets were flying right and left, and we were so excited we didn't know what to do, so...
Tell me, Miss Kramer, what are your plans for the future?
I really don't know. There's so many things I want to do that I can't make up my mind.
I need something to
Well, what do you want to say? What do you want to do? United States. You mean you want to go back to the United States?
I'm nice to him, okay?
The camera's off right now. You don't have to lie.
No, it's not.
What?
I'm nice to him, people.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Give you everything you want because you're a prince.
Everything?
No.
Say?
Hey guys, just letting you know that I love my husband so much, and I'm very nice to him. He gets treated very well. You're an idiot.
That's funny.
They're such a good couple.
Introduce 3 charming young ladies. 3
Ladies.
sisters who help making the lonely hours much happier. The Fernandez sisters.
This is a long video, man.
There were 3 little sisters who lived in Manila by the sea. Till some tiny island farmers with love and happy farmers came to set the Filipinos free.
Well, I don't have to beatbox. They got it for me.
We're sent o'er the hills and far away to a place called Los Baños, por Dios por cuantos años, but that alas no one could say.
Okay. Jerk, you made me cry. You made me cry. God, that was a long one. And it ended with me like sobbing like a little girl. Yeah, there you go. There was a lot going on there. My back hurts. Very good story. Very well done. Very well put together video by Fat Electrician. Again, go sub to him, man. That was worth it. That was long and worth it. Yeah, and again, please like and subscribe down below. We're getting closer to 6,000 subs, so I thank you very much for all that. And if you have any suggestions for any other videos or anything you want me to do, please put it down in the comments. And also, if nothing else, call me a jerk. That's cool too. I kind of like that. I get off on it. Anyway, thank you very much, and bye.